complain about, those who feel that Israel gets a raw deal in the media, is they say, why do you focus so much on Israel? Why not on Sudan? Why not on Congo? Why not on Guinea? Why not on places where people are really being tortured and destroyed, and where there really is a crisis by comparison? It must be that you're doing this out of a kind of anti-Semitism. So there actually is some anti-Semitism in the world, that's for sure. And that may be playing a role. But there are other factors as well. And they're worth remembering. One of them is that this land that the Jews consider holy is also considered holy by 4 billion other people, Christians and Muslims. Nearly 2 billion Christians and 2 billion Muslims consider that land holy. So what happens on it matters to them, which is not the case in Guinea. So that's very important to understand. Those names, Hebron and Jerusalem and Bethlehem, they're not just names of towns for many, many people in this world. Okay? 2 billion Muslims, 2 billion Christians, and 175 Jews. So you have to understand that there's a lot of people out there who have that view. The other thing is that the whole story of the Jews' return to this land is an amazing tale. Here you have a people that was nearly decimated in the greatest form of human destruction that we know of in history. Not so long ago, a third of them destroyed, 6 million people. And then within some decades, they go back to a place that they feel roots in, and they build an incredibly successful society. I'm not saying that it is flawless, but incredibly successful, with nearly $30,000 GDP per capita GDP, at a level of sort of Portugal and that kind of a country, where it's a high-tech hothouse. It's an unbelievably successful place in a very short time. That's what we call a good story. And then, of course, those same people who were nearly destroyed, who had such great success, are also, it turns out, occupiers and also doing terrible things to other people. So the victims have become victimized. Now that's what we call a great story. So there is inherent drama in everything that goes on in this place. There is an enormous interest in it by billions of people, and it's not all about trying to get the Jews in the focus on the story. It's just a damn good tale, and that's important to remember on its own. Another thing that's important to remember for people who feel that Israel is not properly understood is that actually the Zionist narrative is a difficult narrative to grasp. The Palestinian narrative is very easy to grasp. If these are people who've lived here for hundreds of years, they turn around, a bunch of Europeans are showing up and saying, actually, this is our homeland, excuse us, and now there are guys with guns telling them what to do. That's easy to grasp. The Zionist narrative, and I don't take anything away from its legitimacy, is hard to understand. And therefore, at quick glance, it's kind of harder to get one versus the other. There's something about the whole notion of Jewish people which is very hard for people to grasp. Here is a people, but it's a religion. You can convert into it, and then you have like instant citizenship compared to the person who lived there for all those years. Very complicated story. At the moment, this diplomatic isolation that has affected Israel, I think has also affected its ability to hear criticism, so that while much in the Goldstone report is worth examining, there is a sort of defensive wall that has gone up in Israel about any criticism, because there is such a growing movement to delegitimize the country and to delegitimize the entire Israeli story. So any criticism is now seen as part of that. I'm overstating it, but that's a broad outlook in Israel, and therefore there is a great defensiveness about everything that comes along in terms of criticism, and it'll be very interesting to see if in the end this government in Israel decides to form an independent national commission to look into Goldstone. There's a military investigation that's been completed and not yet published, but details of it have gotten out in a 50-page document that they gave to Ban Ki-moon last week. But I don't know. I mean, again, you remember what I told you about the Army. The Army is sort of this place that people feel very strongly about in Israel. And the Army does not want to put its soldiers and commanders through another investigation. And Ehud Barak, the defense minister, has those guys, is with those guys. There are other people who feel differently. Dan Meridor, who's the intelligence minister, Aaron Barak, the former chief justice, have called for independent investigation. And Netanyahu is caught in the middle. It'll be very interesting to see what he decides. When I went into Gaza, we were barred from going into foreign correspondence during the 3-week war. But when I got in on the last day of the war, I was struck by a number of things. First of all, Gaza, of course, is a poor place, but it's not that poor. It's not like Africa. There is no starvation. There is nearly universal literacy in Gaza. It is not one of the most miserable places on earth. I've been going there for nearly 30 years, so I know it pretty well. But that takes nothing away from its misery. It is in a very difficult position right now. Anyway, what struck me about this is that after all of these years of a kind of intimate, forgive me, occupation, which is a mix of love and hate that existed there, the Israelis left in 2005, and then when Hamas was elected, the Israelis sort of took the view, well, wait a minute, I mean, you know, those guys hate us, they want us destroyed and dead. We're not going to be nice anymore about this. And when they ended up going to war on December 27th of last year, 2008, they came in with a fairly aggressive push. And they also figured something that they were, I think, largely mistaken about, which is that if you follow the debate about this war, you will know that they spent a lot of time and energy on warning people to leave when they were coming. Leaflets, phone calls to your cell phones would ring in Gaza, and someone would say in Hebrew accent in Arabic, we're coming to your neighborhood tomorrow, you should leave. And leaflets were dropped from the hundreds of thousands of them, and text messages and all sorts of things. And they figured decent people will understand and leave, and anyone who has remained is a bad guy, is a fighter, and we need to take that guy out. So after telling everybody to leave, then they showed up, but a lot of people didn't leave. I don't say the majority left, but 20%, 25% is a lot of people still staying in their houses. Why did they stay? You know, they don't own insurance, this is their house, they're not used to go, there's nowhere to go. All sorts of reasons people stay when they're told to leave in these situations. The other thing that I found interesting when I spent a long time talking to people in Gaza is they didn't leave because they knew the Israelis. They spoke Hebrew, they used to work in Syria, they used to work there, these guys are not going to treat us that way. And then they came through and they treated them that way because they thought they were Hamas fighters if they were still there. And so there ended up being a sort of horrible set of tragedies that occurred. I mean, some of it, I believe, unintentional, and some of it worth deciding whether it was intentional or not. But I was really struck in El Atatra, in the village northwest of Gaza, where I spent a week trying to reconstruct what happened there during the war, at the sense of betrayal that so many people felt. And in fact, when the army was coming, they were on their phones calling their friend Daddy and their friend Mordecai in Israel, saying, what the hell is going on? What's going on with your army? Why are they doing this? One of the reasons that it's also so difficult in Gaza today is because there is this blockade, and you read briefly from the story that referred to the blockade, which is that Israel and Egypt won't let anything in. So in January of last year, 4,000 homes were destroyed, and none of them had been rebuilt because no cement and no glass, or very little glass, is getting into Gaza. So there is this sense, and that was one of the things the Goldstone report picked up on, the sense that the war and the blockade are of a piece, which I don't entirely agree with, by the way. I think that one is an IDF or a military policy, and one was a government policy, had to do with politics. Not a very successful policy, but one of the problems with the failed policies, we see this in the United States and Iraq and Afghanistan, is nobody knows a better alternative, or at least nobody is buying a better alternative. So there is this blockade, the aim of which, from Israel's perspective, is to make the West Bank look good and Gaza look bad, so the Palestinians will make the right choice next time they have such a choice. But one of the problems with this is that there are 1.5 million people in Gaza living a life without a horizon. There are no factories, there is no industry, there is no economy. No one is starving, I'll repeat. No one is even hungry, to be fair about it, because they send in 100 trucks a day, and there are colonels in Tel Aviv counting calories to make sure